share my screen and we will get things going. All right, hopefully you can see my screen. Javad, if you could just give me a nod that you see the, awesome, all right. Well, thank you everybody and welcome to our Tech Talk. My name is Kim Iverson. I am the director for the New Digital Alliance. Today with us today, I should say, we have Javad Ahmad from Smart IS International, and he'll be our guest speaker today. Our Tech Talks, just to kind of level set everybody, they are primarily geared towards our college student population as a way to help them learn about the diversity of jobs and technology here in Northeast Wisconsin as they start to look towards the future and looking towards that employment. Also as a way to connect them with some of our local businesses who may eventually be where where our college students end up being hired. So welcome. If you're not a college student, that's okay. We are glad to have you here as well. And you are also welcome to be asking questions when we hit the Q&A section of today's presentation. Before we get things too much further in, we do want to thank all of our investors who make events like this possible. The companies you see here support the New Digital Alliance through financial funds as well as through volunteer help, and are supporting our local community in engaging with our students in K-12, higher ed, as well as our professionals throughout the region. So thank you to our investors. We appreciate your help and your willingness to help us do everything we do here in Northeast Wisconsin. So our agenda for today, we've already sort of covered the welcome and introductions. In just a moment, we will kick off with the presentation from Javad Ahmad. And when he has finished his presentation, we'll open up for Q&A. Don't be shy, please go ahead and ask those questions that you are burning to ask about being a consultant or moving into the consulting world. Javad has, as you'll learn shortly, has a number of years of experience in consulting. If you are microphone shy, please feel free to use the chat button at the bottom of your window. That'll open up a chat window for you, and then you can type in the chat and I will ask the questions of Javad on your behalf. If you're not microphone shy, then please feel free to just pipe up and ask your questions during that Q&A session. All right, so with that, I would like to welcome Javad Ahmad. He is the president and COO of Smart IS International. They are a consulting company located here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, as well as elsewhere. And I'm going to leave it at that because I know that Javad has a great introduction of himself as well as his company as part of his presentation. So with that, Javad, I'm going to stop sharing and let you take over.
Thank you, Kim. So kindly please let me know once you see my screen.
Coming up now. Perfect, there we have it.
All right, cool. So just before I get started, I set up the topic as the good and the bad, but I think Kim insisted to add the ugly parts. So the ugly is there as well. But nonetheless, I will start out by just laying out the agenda. Basically, if everybody can, I know that I am setting this up, the topic, with an understanding that majority of the audience is all students, but if there's anybody else in the audience, if you could just drop that into the chat, and even somebody that has the any specific career choice or consulting path that they're looking to, just kind of helps me later on, direct my talk a little bit in that specific area. And what you see me do frantically is as soon as I started sharing my screen, I lost all my windows. So I'm trying to figure out where the chat is. Just a second. But anyways, I'll find it. But to just kind of get going, myself, I'll talk about that. I'll talk a little bit about our company. I will walk you through in my mind as to what are the different types of consulting. I am a pretty big proponent of consulting, so therefore I draw a very big contrast with consulting versus contracting. So I'll talk about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about, a consulting role and versus an industry role. An industry role, what I mean by it is a regular job on what I say on the other side of the equation. We'll talk a little bit about, in my opinion, and mind you, all of this is my opinion. So there's no standard, there's no best practice, there's nothing. If there's one, I don't know that. As a consultant, I usually make best practices. So anything I say, you should consider it to be a best practice. And that's just a joke. But in anyways, I'll talk a little bit about consulting career paths and what makes into a consulting an exciting career. And then at the end, we will talk about, is it right for you or not? And then you can make your own determination from that. And then we'll open up for question and answer. Just a little bit about me. I am a graduate of UW Oshkosh many, many years ago. I have also completed a Six Sigma Master Certificate from UW-Madison. I am currently enrolled into the Executive MBA program at UW Oshkosh, and I'm also trained into project management from Project Management Institute. From a career standpoint, my very first job out of college was ARI Network Services. That is the only job that I've held that is not in consulting. And that did not last much long. I think I was employed there for about a year. I got bored. And then every company after that I worked for is a regional or a national or a global consulting firm. And then I ended up at SmartIS, which is a very regional, although we do have a global footprint. So just talking a little bit about who we are. So we have been in business since 1988. Over the course of the years, as the technology advanced, as the businesses transformed and the landscape of IT transformed, so did we. So long, I'm not going to bore you through all of that, but we started out as a very ERP focused firm, and then and mostly focused into the traditional set of ERP, i.e. more in the finance, HR type of realm, and then manufacturing. But in 2000, we started to get more into transportation, logistics, more on the execution side, warehousing, and then a little bit more into 2010 onwards, we got ourselves into more custom development, mobile, web, and all of that type of additional services that we can offer. We do take pride in the fact that we have a global footprint. We do have variety in our customer portfolio that allows us to be very, very innovative in the solutions that we deploy. And part of that is that we are very keen on learning from our customers as well. At the moment, we have 3 locations that we operate out of. We have obviously headquartered in Oshkosh. We have a center of excellence in Islamabad, and then we do have a sales office in Frankfurt. We are very much a believer in engaging ourselves locally within the community. And for that, we do participate in many local and some national and international organizations as well. But that is, this is a representation of our office in the US. However, we also have the similar representation in our other locations as well. Then just getting into, because so a lot of this is, typically I don't do that detail of an introduction of our company. I opted to do this in this particular topic is because we are obviously a consulting company. And then if you understand and appreciate how we are structured, that would allow you to understand how in any career path that you will select that leads into consulting, how to navigate through them, because the setup is fairly standard in terms of how different consulting organizations are set up and they work. So we are an IT and a business consulting firm. In that context, we have divided our macro level services into consulting and managed services. So managed services is those continuous improvement opportunities and ongoing services that we have, and consulting are project-driven, project-based consulting services. And these are all the different disciplines that we specialize in. How any of the consulting firms typically align themselves, they align themselves around a technology. And one of the things that they also tend to do is to establish partnerships with their respective technology that they are representing, or try and get some certification in that. So we are obviously aligned ourselves with Microsoft, Oracle, Blue Yonder, which is one of the execution system. And then we do have what we describe as generic services, which is where we do our custom development for our customers. So we define these as vertical practices because that is how we align our teams, and that's how a lot of project work is funneled through to the teams. We complement that with our horizontal practices because these are the disciplines that do not necessarily lie as in a vertical of a technology stack. As a matter of fact, they cut across through all of those. So project management, business process, and data, they are not specific to any given technology stack that we work with. So these are the ones that we describe as horizontal practices that cut across all those, so that allow us to kind of maximize not only our utilization, but also the innovative spirit that we can bring through from cultivating the thought process of different industries and different customers that we have been exposed to. And by that definition, different technologies. We do work out of many. So as I said, we have been in business for more than 30 years. So as part of that, we have had the opportunity to work with many local, global businesses, as well as in many different industry sectors. This is just a little bit of a view of our offshore setup, and that's our Center of Excellence in Islamabad. One of the things that we as a company are very much aware of and have a very deliberate and conscious effort towards is to ensure that we have a diverse and innovative and young and energetic team that keeps us more from the current with the technology, as technology keeps on changing. The other aspect of that is that we, as I said earlier, are very much involved in the local communities and participating in different forums to ensure that not only that we are able to give opportunities to our employees to participate, but also allow for that flow of thought process and brainstorming that we can benefit from and facilitate within our communities that we're working with. So I tend to look at, and we will talk about that in a little bit, as to how each of the consulting firms are set up. You will find in the realm of consulting, contracting mixed in. And then as part of that, you will also see a lot of subcontracting and a lot of firms that are doing subcontracting. So we take pride in the fact that all of our staff is full-time staff with us. By that definition, we have the ability to invest into them and take the advantage of their, the knowledge and the intellectual property that we are instilling in them, and they're basically gathering themselves. We are a little bit different in terms of our approach to offshore. We deliberately do some duplication of resources to ensure that we have nothing that gets lost in technology, in translation, I should say, between our onshore and offshore teams. And then we are a big proponent and we invest heavily into R&D. So every time, all the time, there's something new that we are working towards. We have our own tenants in the cloud for each of the technologies that we work with. And there are teams that are continuously working on ensuring that they have a good handle on the new technology. And we always say that we ourselves keep ourselves at the bleeding edge so that we can keep our customers at the cutting edge. We don't want them to bleed. So this is, I will switch now to our topic at hand, which is all about consulting. So just a little bit joke on my own expense. Consulting is notorious for basically regurgitating everything that the customer is saying, or that we are very, pompous and proud, and we are very expensive. And in reality, some of that is true, right? So, but the fact of the matter is, consulting is also very, very beneficial, and that is where a lot of businesses engage consultants in ensuring that they can actually help resolve those business problems that the customers are facing on a routine basis, and facilitate the change management within those organizations to allow for those solutions to be implemented, and so that they can take advantage of them. But so consulting, I wanted to start out just as a basic definition of what consulting is. So consulting, basically, as defined by Oxford, is engaged in the business of giving expert advice to people working in a professional or a technical field. So I just took the keywords out of that, and those really the words that one who is wanting to be a good consultant must pay attention to all of these words to ensure that they can actually appreciate them and instill those behaviors and values within their professional life. So they have to be engaging. We are looking at supporting businesses. So at the end of the day, businesses are looking for value. We are looking to give expert advice. And then we are engaging with people. So having a people perspective to that, on the other end of the equation, there is also people. So we're not, so empathy, you will see, is one of the aspects that I talk about being a good consultant, is very, very important. So, but nonetheless, as consulting, it is simply a business of providing expert advice to a specific group of people. And so by that definition, consulting is not necessarily limited to any given sector. It's not limited to a given discipline. It is all about what consultants have to offer, which is an advice, which can be done for you as a service. We can be brought in to replace a function within the organization. So you will see in many cases, consultants will provide, that's in essence what our managed services is. So we are replacing an internal operation, and by that definition, taking that ownership to us, and then, or to augment. So we have the ability, so consultants are brought in to augment the existing teams. Otherwise, we are also brought in for training and coaching purposes. So that is what typically a consultant do. And now this can be applied into many different disciplines and many different industries. So what are the different types of consultants? So as I said earlier, a consultant in itself is just an expert that has something to say and something to offer. So by that definition, you could have consultants in any disciplines. You can have an environmental consultant, social media consultant, an image consultant. You can have in healthcare, financial, marketing, all sorts of, every field, every sector will have a consultant that would be, a career path in consulting within those industries. However, my understanding is today we're more focused on IT and management consulting. So within IT consulting, so I just wanted to explode that into typically what a consultant does, we're in the role of an architect, we are in the role of a developer, implementer, we've been asked to configure and optimize business processes and or systems. In the management consulting role, a management consultant can be a generalist, can be more focused into industry or a process or a function. But in most of those cases, the management consultant is directly working to help business improve their performance. And often they will be asked to do the auditing, they ask for specific advice, they work in the strategic sessions, they may be brought in to help, facilitate the operations or to help, implement the change management around that. Compliance, regulatory compliance sometimes is a major aspect of management consulting, and risk management certainly is another big component of management consulting. So again, this is not a all-inclusive, exhaustive list. These are just some of the ideas that I wanted to share, so that it gives you some thought in terms of what type of roles one can have within a consulting career. The types of the consulting firm, they're all over. So this is, it is becoming, it goes up and down in terms of, what's hot, where it is, in terms of the saturation level within consulting, the rate structure within consulting, and all of that goes up and down. And based on that, the companies grow or shrink all the time within the world of consulting. However, the landscape remains the same. We ourselves look at ourselves as more of a niche player in some areas, but a generalist otherwise. And we do have a reach that, as I said, is global. So we do have a global footprint, although we are a very, very small organization in comparison to the ones that that exist out there. So who are these large organizations? And I just wanted to put that out there to kind of give you a perspective of how large the consulting industry is, or within that, the management and the IT consulting. Some of the names you may know, some of the names you may not know, but these are considered to be the best of the best, the largest, biggest, baddest consulting firms that are out there. On the McKinsey, the Boston, Accenture, Deloitte, and Bain, they are considered as the top big 5 consulting firms. More on the management side, I would say, than IT. If you look into the IT side, then you would get into like PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst Young, Deloitte & Touche, and then KPMG. And then if you look at from a revenue standpoint within these firms, how they rank is, Accenture is, it's at $17.3 billion. So it is a large footprint. It is a large organization that is servicing global customers. But the other thing that I also wanted to highlight is Tata and Cognizant. They're both Indian firms. So when you come into the world of consulting, a lot of these geographic boundaries don't matter. They do have a global footprint. They operate as such, and they do have very large local presence as well. So each one of these organizations, I don't know exactly how Tata and Cognizant are, but I did know at one time how much Infosys and Wipro have in just the staff that is within the US. I think they employ each one of them separately about 50,000 employees just in the United States. So that is, if you can look at an entire city of Oshkosh could be employed, right? So that's just kind of give you a perspective in terms of the scale of some of these organizations. So now I want to talk a little bit about contracting, because often when you get into consulting, I grew up around Big Five in the 90s, where there was very little to no contracting. Everything was consulting, and we had a very specific, distinguishment between, what is contracting and consulting. Today, however, people meld the two together and there is no real difference that as it is portrayed in the world of contracting. So just as you're looking into that, I just wanted you to be aware that there is a difference between contracting and consulting. Contracting typically is that you're hired to do simple thing X, and then the goal is to get it done as quick and as cheap, right? It does not give you the opportunity as a holistic engagement to where you have advisory opportunities, or you have the ability to actually, one of the key elements of consulting is advice. So you basically are just taking the orders and producing result. So you don't have really the opportunity to advise. And that then limits your exposure within the business and within the industry. That is one of the benefits that I talk about in consulting that provides, if you choose a career in consulting, it really gives you tons of exposure. So in essence, then that makes your engagement very, very, very tactical as opposed to strategic. So an alignment within consulting grows your career because you are always working on strategic path. And then I put that into, you become more of an operator mindset because you're not really engaging yourself in innovation or on a net new thought process, and therefore you're just simply operating on a given set of instructions versus analyzing and innovating, and that's the different type of mindset. So if you really, really want to pursue a career in consulting, pay attention to these aspects, and then kind of have the ability to differentiate and rightly choose, is it a contracting engagement or it's a consulting engagement. So consulting versus an industry role. So this is where it is what I said earlier in my opening, as to say, is that I will talk about as, I as a consultant am operating in a given industry, working side by side with the experts of subject matter experts, as we call them, of that industry. And they also too have a consultative approach to a business, to their own business, except they are very, very limited in terms of their exposure to that industry and to that given business per se. So while some of the things that we will do are the same in that engagement, in that project, our outcomes will be very, very similar. They are not the same, right? And there are going to be pros and cons in both of them. And the biggest thing that I look at is the fact that as a consultant, we go wide. I know a lot about a lot of things. I know a lot about many different industry, but I have never been an expert at any one of them, right? So if you go into an industry, you have the opportunity to get that deeper domain knowledge, and because you're not just advising, you're actually working through that, and you are experiencing those things on a day-to-day basis. So then I look at it and says it is a personal choice. Consulting is not for everyone. And I joke about that I have considered moving to the other side, and my wife thinks that I will not last there for more than 3 days because I would be bored, because nothing is changing. So again, it is more of a personal choice, but so I just want you to kind of appreciate that as you look into different career paths. However, if you do choose to be in consulting, right? So I always say that consulting puts your career on steroids, because you are going from project to project. You're going from one industry to another industry. You're switching technologies. So your switch and your turnover is at much faster pace than anything else that you would experience in the industry. Because in the industry is going to be either as a whole industry tied down to a specific set of technologies. They are going to be moving as a whole at a certain pace, or within the customer that would further slow you down a little bit because of the fact that the customer itself is married into it, because they're not going to change every year and a half a new technology just because that is now available. They are going to allow it to kind of gain the benefit from it. So again, as I said, you may get a lot of domain knowledge and deep knowledge of exactly how certain industries work. But when you start looking at the overall variety of how different processes, technologies, solutions, and different paradigms work within overall nature of all industries, you will start to be a little bit lagging behind if you're just an industry specialist. So by that definition, says consulting puts your career on steroids because you do grow very, very fast. So what makes what makes a good consultant? And I added stupid to this because I really think the ones that don't do this are really being stupid. But the idea of being a good consultant is that you do always want to have the ability to see the big picture. As a consultant, mind you, I created a contrast between contracting versus consulting. And one of the things is, do you appreciate the bigger picture? Even if I'm given a screen, like I'm going to give some IT examples, but if I'm given, or just a process to work with, it will be not a very smart thing for me to do is to just focus on that and not have, take a step back and understand the entire operation of the company, understand what are the stakeholders that are benefiting from that and how this process merges with another process or how it benefits the company as a whole. The more I know of the bigger picture, the more relevant I will become, and the more the advice that I will offer is going to be much more readily acceptable because it is more in tune with the operations of the company. And as a consultant, you're always talking. Your part of your job is to be presenting. Part of your job is to be selling your ideas. Part of your job is to be documenting everything that you do. So the confidence that you bring to the table is very, very impactful in terms of how you will be received within a given consulting engagement. So interpersonal skills are very important. I often talk about that to my teams when I coach them is, whereas in a standard, it's a very basic, I would say, practice for most of the organizations to allow for about 3 months for somebody to kind of get into the job, get settled in, and there's a performance evaluation. And I often challenge my team that when you walk into a meeting, at best may have 3 seconds to work with that room, with that team, because the moment you walked in, the way you looked, the way you dressed, the way you walked, the way you said your hello, somebody has already formed an opinion about you. So you have to be very much aware of yourself or your surroundings. And so interpersonal skills and confidence is the one thing that makes a good consultant. I often talk about that I would hire an average skilled person that has a better personality than a very highly skilled person that has no personality, because I am in a way of selling solutions, and selling is part of every consultant's job. So, and then the other aspect of that is that if you're not a troubleshooter, if you don't have the ability to break down a problem, then you will not be very, very successful. If you have you get fixated on a given thing and not have the ability to basically reject your own ideas. Don't get, we have the tendency to get, married into our own and fall in love with our own ideas. And often when you start to look into, if you really have the ability to step back a little bit, you will see that not always my idea is the best idea. So you have to have less of an ego, more of an empathy and ability to kind of accept, what others have to offer as well. And then in almost every circumstance, change management as a discipline becomes very, very critical to being a good consultant, because you're always mind you, as a consultant, you are brought in to bring a change, right? And if you don't understand what change management is, either in technology, process, people, any of those or levels, you will be not be a very successful consultant, or your engagement may not be very successful. So what makes a bad or downright stupid consultant? You know, arrogance. That's the very, I've seen so many good, talented people fall prey to that just because they think they're better than everybody else. And I have seen people being thrown out of the meetings. I've seen engagements getting canceled because of one person, because the organization thought that they just did not respect them. And it may be the case that you know it all, and you may be the case that you have the right approach, and just the customers is not paying attention, but you just don't approach it with arrogance. Often I've seen that consulting firms as well as consultants tend to oversell their abilities and ideas. And so don't ever do that, because it will go, it will come through very quickly. And then if that happens, you know, one of the things that as an advisor that you're banking on is the fact that they trust you. That means that your trust is going to go out of the window, and then nothing from that onwards is going to work. And then, you know it all attitude is just be humble. You know, you may be right, but don't have to rub it in. And I talked about personality. And the other thing I've seen is that often, you know, we do get into some long-term relationships within our customers, and we do have, you know, engagements that go for years and decades. So be always aware of how you are, you know, navigating through that customer. They are not your company. Don't get involved. Don't get involved. Don't start sharing opinions. Don't start to align yourselves against somebody else and all. So the idea of a consulting engagement is you are there just to help them out, and you're not there to get involved. And as long as you can keep that distance, you will find yourself to be in a good situation. So why would you choose a consulting career? So on an average, and I know that there's exceptions, consulting pays better. So that's obviously one of the reasons why people will be attracted towards consulting. If you like to travel, there is certainly a great opportunity in travel. Over the last year and a half, I have not traveled, and I am now, you know, I used to be going somewhere every other week, and I'm not going anywhere. So the opposite is also true. I'm bored. But so if you like to travel, then consulting is a good opportunity to travel the world. And it does expose you to many different industries and different business models. Even if you're within the same industry, you'll see different organizations work differently, prioritize things differently. So you learn a lot. And again, that is if you have your learning hat on, if you keep your listening ears open, that is how you would learn. But if you go in with a very narrow focus, I'm going to get this thing and get done and get it out, then you will not learn. And then you're more falling towards the contracting side of the equation. Consulting does give you the flexibility and a little bit of a freedom. But later on, I will also talk about, you know, how that is the good, the bad, the ugly. But, you know, the flexibility comes from the fact that, you know, a lot of consulting firms are driven towards outputs. They could care less about inputs, right? The inputs matter only because of billable hours. But if you're doing a lot of billable hours and yet nothing is being produced, you will be called into somebody's you know, office somewhere. But nonetheless, so as long as you're performing, you do have a lot of flexibility and freedom within consulting. Because you are measured as such, and you're going to be gauged with the success that you bring to the projects and to the organizations. So the other thing I say is that if you're getting into consulting, mind you, you must accept the fact that consulting is a lifestyle choice. Consulting is not a 9-to-5 job. It is not something that you will say, well, I have, this plan and I'm planning 2 years ahead. I can tell you that, I don't plan anything beyond, in my personal life, actually don't plan at all. I'll see when it is, how it is. Now I do enjoy some privileges being in the position that I am, and with the technology that we have, so we can carry our work with us everywhere, but that is what it is. My cell phone is always on, my email is always on. I cannot say that I'm turning it off because somebody somewhere could care less, because they need it now, and then they're dependent on us as a consultant. Consulting can offer incredible experiences and career prospect, but it does also ask for significant investment in time and energy. So the other thing is, it does want you to be very, very flexible. If you are not able to, as I said earlier, change your opinions, change your behaviors, change your approaches, you will find a little bit of a difficulty in establishing a career within consulting. On the other hand, communication and continuous learning is also very, very important. So I just wanted to put a picture. So now these are very standard, typical career paths. Obviously, when you go into a given organization, they may have a slightly different take to this, but nonetheless, I wanted to kind of put it out there to let you know that there is a career path in consulting. There is a career path in IT consulting, and that's basically roughly, and if you look at Deloitte and KPMG and PwC and others, they will look at similar level of consultant. You're really brought in as an associate, and there may be different levels of an associate, and during that you really are geared towards more learning. So the idea is to develop a skill, understand the industries and all of that. But as you start to go towards a seniority level, you are put into more of a leadership roles. So you start by leading your own team, maybe you lead a project, you're basically engaged into delivering and defining solutions. You may have to write a proposal, you may have to put together a solution architecture and things of that nature. As a manager, now you're looking at just more of that, right? So you're now sitting, and you may start to get a P&L responsibility at that time, because then you're starting to look at also how your delivery is on target, how your customer satisfaction is playing into the equation, and then how you're scaling to the demand that is coming within the business. As you start to get into seniority within the manager, again, the complexity starts to increase. Ultimate goal is to be able to get to a partner level. So when you get into a partner level, that is where you are now directly responsible for expanding the business, right? So you're not just simply managing what you have, you have growth targets that you have to meet, and then you have to grow accordingly in those roles. So that is, at a partner level or as a director, depending on different industries, they could be referred to as principals. So each one of those will have a specific business development goals and growth that they will be asked to deliver on. So now, the good, the bad, the ugly, why you are here. So I personally love consulting. As I said, that after my very first job, which I did not enjoy too much, it was for a software house, I have been in consulting, and I have loved it every step of the way. I talk about it, even when I am now technically in more of an executive management role, I still engage myself and I keep myself busy with projects only because I enjoy that part of it. And then that is where what I would say is the good part of that is it does help a lot with your career growth. I've seen many people do this, that they do come in, into consulting. If you go, for example, with one of those large consulting firms, sometimes they have a very good boot camp style, training university that kind of breaks you down and builds you up again as a consultant. So people tend to spend, good 10 years or so within consulting, and then they start to go more towards the industry, because that is where they have picked by that time an industry that they like, the industry domain that they have a good understanding of, and that's where they can then just switch over the career to the other side. So that does give you a very good opportunity to even switch over at a later time. Consulting is all results driven. As I said earlier, it's more on the output side as opposed to input. Although so in our company, what we say is the client is managing you. So the client says show up at 8 and they're looking at you, that are you there at 8? Then you must be there at 8. But if the client doesn't care, I don't care, because what we care about is the milestones that we have established with the customer, the outputs of the solutions that are supposed to be delivered, if they are being met on time. So what that means is sometimes I may just blow off a day, but that also means that I'm sitting on a Saturday finishing up and catching up. So that is the level of flexibility, because that's what it means to be results driven. The bad, I talked about that. Consulting tends to lead into a very poor work-life balance. I sometimes, as a matter of fact, in our organizations, when we do award the best consultant of the year, we don't thank them. We thank their family, because that has meant that, or especially that we have another award we define as a road warrior in terms of how many miles they've put on in the air or on the road. We also again thank their family, because all of these things, if I have to go travel to someplace, especially when I was with KPMG, it was my regular thing to get out to the airport on a Sunday and then come back home on a Thursday. I had a Friday, Saturday home, but Friday was still a work day for me. But in any way, so you don't see your family too often, but you do tend to travel a lot, and then you get that exposure. You will have long hours and hard deadlines, because, as I said, everything is results driven and outputs driven. So just if you're not somebody that can handle that, then you will be a little bit in a tough situation. It can get very high pressure and stressful. I have on the ugly part that you will get blamed. Often it's easy to blame a consultant. And that does add stress, that does add pressure to deliver and to be successful. You're not given, as I said, within 3 seconds, somebody has made an opinion about you. You will be the first person that will be pointed out in the team. If you're a consultant in that team and everybody else is not, people are pointing your mistakes out faster than anybody else's. So that again lends into pressure and stress that will come in. And then also often just accept that you will not be, it's tough for some of the customers to appreciate you. I can also tell you that I have had customers that have appreciated me a lot, and that after every 10, if one does it, that just solidifies you again, and then gets you going again. I have had customers that after 10 years that I've met them and I haven't worked with them, and they still remembered me and appreciated this one thing that I did for them at a given time. So that comes with that as well. But majority of the time you will be biting your lip and say, well, what the hell? I did that. Why did somebody else take the credit for it? And you just need to accept it. That's going to happen. And then one of the things that I miss in consulting, and I don't know if everybody will, this is my personal, pet peeve about consulting, is the fact that we we're hired to do something, we're engaged with a project, we may be there 6 months, we may be there a year and a half. And once the project is rolled out, within a few weeks, we're rolled off, right? So I never get to see how that work that we did really played out, so, and how it really benefited, or how people used it. We did see that during testing, we did see that in the implementation phase, but like a year in or whatever, so we don't get to see that. So that is something that I miss in terms of being a consultant, as to say what are the real implementations look like. And then on the ugly side, this is just very true. I always say is that as a consultant, you must learn to develop a thick skin, because it's very easy and sometimes strategic for organizations to point the finger at the consulting firm, because they're external. They may go, but they still have to live with their own teams and all of that. So consultants do get blamed for a lot of stuff that otherwise I think is sometimes a mistake done within the teams by the customers, but the consultants end up taking the blame. And the other part is too, as a consultant, you may have to choose to take the blame. And that is to ensure that you have a good relationship with a customer, is to ensure that the success of the project is paramount. And then you just basically accept. You don't want to get into long heated debates as to whose fault it is, and say, okay, we accept and we are just going to move on. So that is the other aspect of that, is that some people don't take that very well, and I've seen that when some of these aspects becomes contentious with a customer, it just never has a good ending to it. One of the biggest thing that is, especially with larger consulting firms, like the one I work for, KPMG, and I think it's the same true for Deloitte and Pricewaterhouse or Accenture and other management consulting firms as well, their career paths are set up to be up or out. So if you are not growing within the organization, you will be let go. So that is basically, so remember one thing that I said earlier about a consulting career is that you have to continuously learn and continuously grow. And one of the things that is difficult that happens within I'm just going to go back to this. Once you go beyond the manager into senior manager role, and if you fail to become a partner, you are a very heavy burden on the organization, because you're earning a very hefty salary at that time. And if that is holding true and you're not bringing new business in, so then at some point, they will have to retire you or, lay off, whatever the stuff that they will put around it, but you will be out. So that the next step is to become a partner. So you always have to pay attention to that you're not just growing your specific skill set that is on any given, if you're a financial consultant or HR or IT or whatever, but you're looking at a business aspect of that too, especially if you want to live into that realm of consulting. So that's what I had. I wanted to go a little fast just so that I leave time for Q&A, and we have, 5 minutes? Sorry.
No, that's all right. And we can, if there are a lot of questions, we can certainly keep the session open for a little bit longer. Mm-hmm. So from our students, I'll open it up to you guys first. Questions for Javad. Feel free to either, open your mics and ask, or type them into the chat. So
there's stuff in the chat. So I'm just gonna, somebody has something.
I was asking some questions of the students while you were talking. Mm-hmm. All right, I have a couple for you, Javad. We can get mm-hmm. things going here. So from a college student perspective, does Smart IS hire directly from college?
Yes, we have. We almost all the time, so we're not a large organization, so we don't have like a boot camp that we hire and then we train. Although we have done that too. So when we started our warehousing practice, we hired a whole bunch of students from college. We put them through a 3-month training, and then anybody who survived that boot camps remained, and others got a free training and got paid for it. But the on the other hand, I would say, arguably saying that some of my best consultants that I have hired were hired as an intern and then just have stayed with us. And they're still with us after like 15, 20 years. So almost every year, we do go out and have the opportunity to hire a few interns that turn into full-time jobs.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Are you aware of other consulting firms here in Northeast Wisconsin that hire out of college?
I think majority will. One of the challenges that happen, and that is just the, and I think you and I, we talked about that as well, that when we, our responsibility is that when we hire somebody, we have to train them up to a certain level before we can place them into a real engagement. Mm-hmm. And because you don't want them to be so necessarily learning on the job, right? Because the client is going to see right through that, and then you may not have a very good relationship after that, right? So I am always like, whenever we hire an intern, and for that matter, I'm sure that when others do that, they have to make sure that they have a good training path. They have to make sure that they have a good life after that in terms of opportunity with customers. And as soon as that lines up, any consulting firm would hire, I think. And I know like some of the locals do also hire right from school, and except would everybody prefer to hire as an intern that graduates into a full-time job? That I don't know.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I know Wipfli is another consulting company here in Northeast Wisconsin that does hire direct from college. So that would be another opportunity for students interested in this career pathway.
Right. And I think Wipfli is a very good example and a very good starting point, because again, Wipfli is it's a national or regional firm, right? So it is not a small organization. They do have multiple disciplines. They're into management consulting. They're into IT consulting. So a career path with Wipfli is very similar to what it would be for Deloitte or with Accenture, or so they will have a very good entry level position.
So I know we're just about at time. For those of any of you on the call, because I know we have a couple business professionals on the call as well. Questions from the group. So Morgan Maxwell says, what are some of the more commonly found reasons companies are seeking your assistance?
So as I said, consulting thrives in two aspects, and that's just a trade secret, right? So one is when there is a new technology that is out there and there's confusion in the market as to how to best utilize such a technology, right? So that is the type of consulting that I like, right? So where I said that we have our own R&D, we have our own, we keep ourselves on the bleeding edge, so that we can learn through the understand the best practices, and why we maintain alliances with the vendor to make sure that we have the first dibs on a lot of training and everything that goes on. So a lot of consulting, high value consulting, comes in that area, right? The other level of consulting comes in when it is just, there is a push within the organization. They're not naturally staffed to handle all the work, because there's a spike, because there's some capital investments going on. So then they would bring in consulting staff as to augment their teams. The third aspect of that is that where in the operational efficiency standpoint, they may determine that certain aspects of the given functions that they may have is not conducive to best serving the business. So they don't want to invest into human resources in those aspects. So that could be, that's similar as outsourcing payroll, for example. A lot of companies do that. You know, you may have, you know, if you look at, you know, your tax consultants come in and they could have a tax and advice. Some of the large organizations do have their internalize that operation as well, but in many cases they don't, because it's not a regular routine value add to the business as they operate. They may be in the business of manufacturing something, so taxing is not, and so is the case with IT. You know, if a lot of operations within IT may not be, you know, best, you know, serving their top line in terms of, or bottom line, however you look at it. So they may outsource that from the aspect of efficiency, from the aspect of lowering their own risk, because, you know, maintaining your team means you have to hire, you have to fire, you have to train, you have to coach, you have to, you know, do all of that. So when they outsource that, then they don't have to worry about any of those things.
Excellent. Other questions from the group?
Who's going to get into consulting?
I've often thought it would be an exciting career path, honestly. I used to work in the IT department at Kimberly-Clark, and we worked alongside consultants all of the time, consultants and contractors, as well as outsourced staff.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're right. It's the consultants I worked with, they were in, they were out, it was quick. You mentioned quick and cheap, you know, that's relative. There were contractors we worked with that billed at $150 an hour or more. They were typically contractors working in a high demand, very specific space.
But I would argue they may not be a contractor. So I remind you, I'm not saying contractor, that if you're coming in, contractor is the mindset.
These were contract project managers that we hired in for a very specific project just to be the PM for that project.
And I'm saying the mindset is that they're looking at the entire organization. They're looking at, so that's not how I'm looking at it, as a differentiator between consulting and contract.
Yep. Yeah, and we did bring in consultants too that were working across or helping us enhance business processes or business areas. And when we say business processes, those that can also apply to processes within the IT department. So, you know, we bring in Deloitte and Touche. We brought in, you know, we worked with Tata, we worked with Cognizant, pretty much, you know, McKinsey, pretty much Ernst & Young, pretty much all of those consulting companies, and including the consulting arms of companies like IBM. So, you know, so consulting cuts across a lot of areas, and, you know, even if you don't end up working as a consultant, you may very well work alongside one in your career at any of the, you know, more traditional corporations that we think about, like a Kimberly-Clark.
Yeah.
All right, I will put out one last call for questions. All right, I'm not hearing anything. Nothing's popping into the chat. So with that, I will say thank you very much, Javad, for presenting today. Hope, you know, I know we didn't get necessarily a ton of questions, but I thought it was an excellent presentation, and hopefully the students as well as our professionals on the call have learned something and got some food for thought to take with them.
And if anybody wants to have a follow-up, please, you know, reach out to Kim. She should be able to share my contact.
Yeah, we'll definitely be happy to share that. And we will also share the recording link out when we get that published out next week. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yep. Take care.